Eugene Cousins here. Welcome back to the channel. And so today we're going to be digging into class number 3 in theory on the movements that your wing could experience, meaning that it's the pitch, roll, and yaw, those 3 different things. Class number 2 was all about aerodynamics and what makes the wing fly, meaning lift. And today we're going to be talking about those possible movements that your wing could go through. So let's get into them. Pitch, roll, and yaw. Pitch, you'll see on this sketch here, I've got the side view of the wing. And if you remember in class number 2, we spoke about angle of attack. That, in summary, was the wing in relation to the incoming airflow. And it's not necessarily that the wind is coming from the horizon. It could be coming with an updraft because you're paragliding on a mountain. So it hits the wing at a different angle because the airflow might be coming from different directions. So angle of attack is different than angle of pitch. So angle of pitch is relative to that horizon, that line on the chord line which I've drawn through from the leading edge to the trailing edge. And you'll see that I've made that circular the circular line just because this is what I'm trying to illustrate with angle of pitch, is they can move forward or backwards. Now there's 2 definitions that you got to get into. I'll put those titles on the screen just to make it easy for you to remember. It's the upper pendulous and the lower pendulous. Now the upper pendulous is a situation is a situation that you could get into with environmental factors or pilot input. So possibly you could have a situation where a strong gust hits you from the front and it shoves the pitch backwards, and that obviously you as the weight move forward. Now this is important to explain. We're going to go over those 2 definitions just quickly, simply because the wing isn't mounted to a fuselage of an aircraft. Now if you look at an aircraft from the side, you have the wing, and the wing is mounted a little bit at a positive angle, pitch, to the aircraft fuselage, and that's called the angle of incidence. Now with a paraglider, we do have a little bit of an angle of incidence when we are trimmed in completely and we take off, and it's also situated back. But here's the big thing: the center of gravity and the center of pressure is far apart, simply because what is the center of gravity? Center of gravity, I'm redefining it again because we've spoken about it in class number 2. But remember, center of gravity is all the weight. That's your center of mass. That's you, the wing, the lines, the paramotor, the fuel, everything that you're carrying. That's the center of mass, and that is suspended with all the lines underneath the canopy, and the center of pressure is at the wing. So center of pressure, how to think about the center of pressure? Well, the pure definition I'm going to give you is 25% behind the chord line. So from it starts the chord line to the trailing edge, from where it starts, 25% behind the start of the chord line is your center of pressure. But the center of pressure is like a pivot point. So if you're going to put a weight to this, it's got a pendulum effect, and it will go back to its neutral position. The center of gravity and the center of pressure is aligned or in equilibrium. Basically you have a perfectly flying paramotor or wing. So this is where you want to get to. But now you've got all these other factors that are interrupting you or interacting on you. All right, so that we're talking about these environmental factors, or you being on the brakes, or you hitting the throttle too hard and the pitch moves back. And so when we talk about the upper pendulous, we're talking about those environmental factors that could possibly move the wing or the pitch forward or backwards. That is like a gust coming in, hitting you from the front, or the pilot hitting the brakes incredibly hard while introducing thrust. But the thrust is also a little bit different. I want to distinguish that clearly. So you've got the factors that are influencing the wing that moves the pitch, and then with the lower pendulous, you've got factors on the center of gravity, on the center of mass, that's introducing a movement or a force that brings the center of pressure and the center of gravity out of equilibrium. What would that be like? That would be like shifting around inside your seat. We call weight shifting. So you're moving in the seat, and therefore that moving of the weight of that was centered, and you start leaning out of that, then the wing starts turning, and that's what you get with your swing arms, like we talked about in class number 1, which is the weight shiftability of something where the center of gravity, the attachment points are lower than the heaviest part of the pilot's body, and he's able to lean out of that and induce a weight shift in the wing. So that is the upper pendulous. But also, extremely important, let's say you go extremely hard on the thrust while you're on the brakes, kind of like what you're doing in takeoff. And so the pitch moves back, here's the mass. So the pitch goes back, you're climbing very hard, but you let go of the thrust very fast, you let go of that throttle. And so basically this could happen where the wing pitches forward, overshoots the pilot, the center of mass moves back, and now the pilot hits the throttle extremely hard again, and now you get a dramatic movement in the opposite direction. And we call this the porpoise effect, where if the pilot keeps doing this, eventually you're going to fall into your wing. And so that's why I do not stand for self-training, where I believe that you do need an instructor, because instructor needs to talk you through that if you do get into that panic situation where you are mistreating the throttle, handling the throttle in the wrong way, and you're causing that pendulous, not the pendulous, but the porpoise effect on the pitch where it can go back and forth. The most important thing that you got to realize or take away from this pitch situation is the fact that the lower pendulous will always overrule the upper pendulous eventually. So that means that the CFG, the CG, the center of gravity, and the center of pressure will neutralize eventually. So if you go off the brakes and you go back onto idle position while you're flying, then supposedly those two, the center of pressure and center of gravity, will get back into equilibrium, and you'll fly straight normal. It's easier said than done, simply because after takeoff, you might not have the altitude to be able to correct that. But that's usually what the instructor will tell the student is go off the throttle, get back into equilibrium, and then reapply the throttle slowly, and then get back into a climb so that you can get out of the danger zone or area close to the ground. Altitude is always your friend. Okay, so we've spoken about the lower pendulous eventually winning over the upper pendulous, but let's get into roll. So you'll see the sketch I've drawn up for you here. You're seeing it from the front, my little man's up there. So roll is a motion like this, where the center of pressure shifts sideways on the glider. And roll, what would cause roll? So roll is, you could have a gust that comes from the side, which shoves the wing to one side, and in response, that if the pilot is not able to actively pilot that you could have a oscillation that forms because of that. Now, normally with a well-designed glider, and this is why equipment is such an important thing. There are various brands that I could mention here that do not have a self-neutralizing ability, meaning that if you go into an oscillation or a roll, oscillation is basically a roll that just continues and could get worse, that it doesn't stabilize itself. So it's important, number one, that you always fly within the weight range of the glider, because if you're over on the weight range of the glider and you're overweight, you're overloading the glider. If that happens, then there is with most gliders, there is a tendency for that little bit of an oscillation to start forming. And a lot of performance gliders also have a tendency to have a little bit of an oscillation present because you're going for maximum performance and speed. And there could be that presence of a little bit of an oscillation, and then the pilot is forced to rectify that the whole time. It's important that it's important for you to know that roll can be cancelled by the pilot anytime by the introduction of the brake in the right way. So you want to get that CFG, the CG, in equilibrium with the center of pressure if you had a roll effect that was caused, and you could use the brakes to be able to do that. How do you do that? So if this is the wing and you are swinging one way, then if you're on the down motion, if you're swinging, right? So if you're on the downward motion, you're going up, and now you're going down. Now, if on the downward motion, if you grab the brakes while you're going down, then you're going to worsen that. You've got to wait until you're at the upwards motion. So you've swung like this, I'm swinging back, and now I grab the brake. So when I return to the neutral position, I'd be braking into it, and then I let go of the brake. So that does take a lot of training, and I usually talk to students through it, but I explain it in theory so they understand at what time. And before the first take or first, second, third, fourth flight, I always ask the student the same thing before they're flying, before they take off. What do you do if a pendulum is created? Because of that little bit of a lack in communication or delay between me seeing and the pilot experiencing it and the communication being transmitted, it could worsen. So that is why the pilot needs to understand what an oscillation is and how to correct it. Go back in this video, listen again to my definition, how to create it. I'm not going to go over those definitions again, or the solutions to that again. All right, so that is the roll motion, and like I said, it's environmental factors that could cause that, or it could be the lower pendulous situation by the pilot inducing a roll by just seesawing on the brakes a bit too much, not braking correctly, but also putting a bit of a roll motion into the glider. So what you want to do, always remember that if an oscillation occurs, that the best possible means to rectify that would be to go off the brakes completely and see if the wing goes back to neutral. Definitely, if your instructor supplied you with a glider that has a oscillation, natural oscillation, continuous oscillation, it's not rectifying itself, the responsibility is up to him to rectify that situation by taking you off that glider or trying to address it by giving you another glider or something like that. Okay, so you're seeing that front view, which is spoken about roll. So now we're looking at yaw. So you're seeing the wing from the top. So you see those ribs. We spoke about it in class number 2, and I didn't draw that out for you, but now you got an idea of where that stitching goes in the lateral side. And yaw is basically the wing turning on its y-axis, right? So it's turning like this. If you're looking at it from the front, it's turning like this. Why would that happen? So we're not going to get into the conditions for when yaw happens in this video because it's going to get too long. But simply, I'm just going to put the phrase out there, something like gyroscopic precession, which is one of the most dangerous situations if you've combined the wrong equipment pieces with underpowered engine and a too big a harness and you get into gyroscopic precession. We'll make a video about the 3 types of things that you got to keep in mind, effects that you have to be able to counter with pilot input, and it affects yaw, obviously, definitely. So yaw could also be, you've got a crosswind, you're flying in one way, the wing naturally wants to turn into the dominant wind direction that the wind is coming from, but you want to fly in a different direction. So we use trimmers to be able to, the side that wants to turn into the dominant wind direction, we close the trimmer on that side, open on the opposite side, and we trim the wing to fly faster so we can counter the crosswind. And get away from that yaw. So I'm not talking about, like I said, not talking about the bad effects of yaw yet. We're going to have to make a video on that because that is quite in depth, and we're going to go through those discussions, and you will be challenged on that in an exam. Those are important questions to answer. Guys, I think I've covered those 3 effects. Just in summary, we've gone over pitch, we've gone over roll, we've gone over yaw. We've talked about the upper pendulous, we've talked about the lower pendulous. We've talked about the fact that center of pressure is on the wing and center of gravity is your mass. We talked about getting them in equilibrium in order to have normal flight, and center of pressure and center of gravity moving out of alignment because of effects that comes from the environment or effects that comes from the mass, meaning thrust or weight shifting, how those can counteract and cause a G-force effect that needs to be neutralized. So we've covered those items. I'm going to get in the air. I'm going to do some practical. I'm actually looking forward to the practical. Get out of the office and get into some action. So see you on the field. Here we go. Going to initiate a roll or oscillation effect. So I'm just worsening it right now, make it as bad as possible. I stay on the power. Now, the instructor's going to tell you go off power and hands up, and then usually will neutralize over time. So have a look at that. It's slowly but surely becoming better. Go off the power, and there we go. Very nicely done. Okay, so let's worsen it and teach you how to grab it. So, got a nice
That's a nice oscillation and roll. It's bad right now. How do you catch it? On the upswing, you grab it. How easy is that? Just one pull on the upswing. All right, that's it. That's all we're going to cover for right now. All right, testing. I hope we got good sound. Going to be illustrating pitch, roll, and yaw. So pitch would be when we called it the down pendulous. Here goes thrust, brakes. See the pitch changing backwards. Now you've got the effect where I'm pushing from below and the wing trying to catch up, but I'm pulling the brakes so the pitch is going backwards. Okay, pitch going forwards. Let's talk about so we did pitch. So pitch can change obviously forward and backwards. Let's go into that. It's hard pitch. And going off the throttle, it pitches forward. See the pitch changing? I'll go hard on the thrust brakes. It changes that. Going off, brakes and pitching forward. That's the porpoise effect. Put strong into that. And that's why your instructor always has to try and get you not to do that. Make sure that you don't get into a porpoise effect because it just gets worse and worse. Alright, so that was pitch. I did roll illustration this morning and how to catch that, so I'm not going to do that again. The thing on yaw, I can't illustrate that unless I'm flying into a crosswind, which is what I'm going to try and do. So this is a crosswind, flying a direct crosswind now. So I don't think this is going to be visible with a camera. Very hard to illustrate the yaw effect right now. I'm going to try and just show you guys. I'm flying, the wind is coming from the east, and you can see my wing is actually tilting a little bit. It's yawing a little bit into the wind. Illustrate that by using the 360 camera. Fly two different directions, both crosswind. Okay, here, directly into the crosswind now. See if the wing will give me a little bit of a yaw. See, it wants to twist towards the right now. So it's twisting towards the right, and what I would do is I would trim out a little bit on this just to get it to fly straight. Here we go. So now I'm actually a little bit too much. Just a little bit there would be about right. That's how I counter the yaw effect with a counter trim. Alright guys, light is disappearing. I am going to go land. I've illustrated pitch, roll, and yaw. And I'm not going to make this video too long. So it's about right. And brake. The human's linked. Pilot's linked from the ground. There we go. I'm putting it down. See you on the next one.